Thank you to all the panelists for coming tonight. It's very chilly, I know. So our first panelist is Dr. Jennifer Whitney, and she will be speaking about the Georgetown University Special Master's Program. She received her PhD in physiology from Georgetown University and is an associate professor in the Department of Pharmacology and Physiology. She teaches the non-cadaveric gross anatomy lectures and is also course director for the Advanced Physiology and Pathophysiology graduate course. And today she's brought along Lisa, who has been through the Special Master's Program at Georgetown, so she can answer any student-related questions that you may have.
We're going to do a quick little switch, though, and start with Dr. Tan, because she's going to provide an overview of what is this thing, Post-Bacc, what does this term really mean, and then we'll go to Georgetown.
Yeah, I think that would be really helpful because it's sometimes used exchangeably with programs that aren't necessarily academic, so that's a really great idea. Well, next we have Dr. Alexandra Tan, who is the Program Director of the Post-Baccalaureate Health Science Intensive Program at Johns Hopkins University. Dr. Tan received her PhD in biology from Johns Hopkins University. Although she has taught both in the fields of science and in writing, Dr. Tan's current focus is on application strategy and effective mentorship.
And last but not least, we have Dr. William Hahn, who is the director of the George Squared Advanced Biomedical Science Program. In addition to running the George Squared program, Dr. Hahn also teaches at both Georgetown University and George Mason University. So welcome, everybody.
All right. So I'm Dr. Tan, as they said, and I'm just going to give you a really brief overview. One of the sheets that was, I guess, at the back of the room is kind of a flow chart for you to look at post-bac programs. It's not specific to any kind of program. It's more about the vocabulary. Hopefully you saw that. So basically, the way that post-bac programs work is that they are, from a very practical sort of perspective, categorized based on the kinds of courses that are offered. Okay, and so if you need the lower division courses, the general biology, general chemistry, organic chemistry, and physics, those programs are called career changer. Okay, so the reason they're called career changers, you can imagine at one point in history, which we don't really see as much these days, people got degrees in something else. Music, economics, psychology, any number of things, and they did a career for a while and then they decided, hey, I want to change careers. But they didn't have the prerequisite science courses to take the MCAT or to be eligible for medical school, so this group of career changers needed a way to fulfill those eligibility requirements and complete those courses. Okay, so if you need to take biology, chemistry, organic chemistry, and physics, those lower division science classes, you would be looking for post-bac programs that are called Career Changer. Okay, so there is a website on the AAMC website here that I have at the top. So if you just type in AAMC space post-bac, this is what you get. Okay. And it is a search engine that includes any post-bac program that wants to be included that's affiliated with the university at no charge to us. So it's not marketing or anything. If we are affiliated with the university, we can be on this page. And so you can see here on your left, I can select here special programs of focus, and you see here the first option is Career Changer. So you can select specifically for this. Now, if you get confused, your advisors know the difference, okay? So the second major category, they're called Academic Enhancer, which is what we're talking about tonight. It's the second one on this list here. Or Record Enhancer, or some version of that. The vocabulary overlaps quite a bit there. So classically speaking, if historically students who took all the lower division classes but weren't yet ready to apply to medical school or dental school or whatever, my world is medical centric, but obviously post-bacs can apply to students who are doing dentistry and other things as well. If you weren't at the end of completing those courses ready to apply to those programs, or you were not successful in those programs, classically the people who were not successful were ones where maybe their GPA was not as strong as it should be. That's not true really anymore, but the language still holds over from that point. So these are going to be programs that expect you to have already completed those courses, and they're going to offer upper division science courses, okay? So these are going to be programs that expect you to have completed the biology, the chemistry, the organic chemistry, and physics. You're going to see those under the eligibility requirements. And then the courses that they're going to be offering are going to be graduate level classes, or they're going to be upper division undergraduate level courses. Whether one is better than the other is mostly subjective, and you should talk to your advisor about that. But they are all categorized the same, okay? So if you are eligible for a career changer program, you are ineligible for an academic enhancer program. And if you are ineligible for an academic enhancer program, then you're eligible for a career changer. You see how that works? They're fundamentally different programs. And the reason they're organized that way is that at Hopkins, we have both kinds of programs. And it depends on where I'm allowed to stick students in classes. So if I can build a program where I can get seats in upper division science courses, then I could build an academic enhancer program. If I can't get access to those classes and I can only get access to the lower division ones, then I have a career changer program. It's, from our perspective, it's a practical, you know, what do I have access to? Now there are programs that meld the two, and the one that I know the best because I used to direct that one is Berkeley. There are others. They, under the same roof, have both programs. Okay, so that might mean that if you're like half done with your lower division classes, but you also want to take some upper division ones, you're going to be looking for ones that are sort of housed in the same place, and they don't have those strong eligibility requirements that you might see, for example, with our program and others, where you really do have to have completed some classes. But by and large, you're going to find they're going to be categorized as academic enhancer or career changer programs. Does that make sense? And that's what you see on that chart in front of you. On here, you will also see underrepresented minority students, economically or educationally disadvantaged, etc. These are categories within career changer or academic enhancer that are looking to help specific populations of students with a particular kind of program. Okay, so they might be academic enhancer programs specifically targeting underrepresented minorities, for example. So those categories will still hold career changer or academic enhancement, and then they might specialize or focus on a particular population of students. Did you want me to say anything else?
I don't think so, unless
Okay.
you all, are there, before we go on, are there any sort of big questions about what she's just covered? Or we'll move to the programs. Okay.
Yeah. So you can just, on this, you can just select whatever you want, and then if you wanted to do like by state, or whether you care if it's graduate or undergraduate, and they've added doc on here, which is nice, you can make those arrangements, and then you can apply the filters, and then these mostly just direct you to the websites, but there is some kind of basic information here. So this is a great place to start to figure out what is available. Now, not every post-bacc program in existence is on this page. It's voluntary on our part, and so there might be ones in existence that are not listed here, and there are lots of complicated reasons why that's true, so you should always check with your advisor if you're thinking about post-bacc, just in case there are some ones that are not included on the list that you should be considering.
You know what, unless this is going to come out in the panel presentation, it might be useful to talk about the differences between like certificate, non-certificate, masters. Is that going to come out? I mean, because you have a certificate and a master's on the panel.
Yeah, I mean, I could do some basics. I mean, I don't
Maybe
know.
real
I don't
quick.
have
Go ahead.
a microphone.
Yeah.
You're fine.
So the post-bacc program that Hopkins offers that is a career changer program is the lower division classes. So we're talking biology, general chemistry, organic chemistry, and physics. Those are super basic classes, absolutely necessary, but super basic. And they are undergraduate level classes. So when the university looks at classes and they says, what level is this being taught at? There's a decision made about whether it's an undergraduate or a graduate level course. Doesn't mean that if you are undergraduate, you can't take graduate classes, but generally speaking, the low-level classes are going to be undergraduate. Unless our students complete like 120 credits, which the university would not allow them to do, they would not get like a second bachelor's. We just don't do that. So typically, the undergraduate level classes are always going to be certificate programs. But the goal is just to finish the classes. the piece of paper is not as valuable as completing the classes, so it's not that big of a deal. So typically, career changer programs tend to be purely certificate programs because of the level of classes that are being provided. Okay? Yeah?
I'm not sure if you can do this, but I know that like the PostBacc program in Gouger states you for like the career changer program as long as you only take it onto program one.
Mm-hmm.
You know, for JSU, like you can't take any of the PBAC courses? Or
We say half. That's a good question. So some of these programs will prohibit eligibility based on the number of classes you've taken, and so that's something to check on. So like for us at least, if you have like biology 1 and 2, you're fine, but if you have biology 1 and 2, organic 1 and 2, and physics 1 and 2, you're done. We don't take you. Yeah.
So you would just be taking the other classes and the ones that you're going to be taking, you just be taking upper level versions of these?
You would be taking additional classes on top of it, so you might be taking biochemistry because you're far enough along in the chemistry series. Our students have access to classes at public health and other things as well. So it's generally going to be you fill it out with other kinds of classes. That's typically what happens. But it's just a practical, like, what we can offer our students rule, really. So some programs are going to have that, and then others won't. If it's an academic enhancer program, it depends on the level of the classes you're being offered. And so if they're upper division but undergraduate level classes, more often than not, it's going to be a certificate instead, because again, they're not going to give you a second bachelor's. That would be silly, and you don't have enough credits for that. But if you're doing graduate level classes, then you could do a certificate if you do a low number. Typically, graduate degrees tend to be like 10 to 12.
It has to be at least 30 credits.
Yeah.
Depends on the credit hour.
Yeah, ours is 40, so yeah, about 30, 40, something like that classes. So if you only take like a handful of classes, I think some of our certificates on our campus are like 4 or 5 classes. So if it's a small number, then that's going to be more like a certificate. If it's a larger number, like 30 to 40 credits, then you could get a master's degree in something, an MS or an MA in something or other. And you would have to look at this particular school about whether that's something they've created as a structure for the Post-Bacc or whether it's a degree that has value unto itself. It's very school specific. Just basically the difference between the two is, at least in terms of the AMCAS application, if they're undergraduate classes, they are averaged with your undergraduate classes. It's a separate line item where it says post-baccalaureate, assuming you categorize them that way, but it is part of your undergraduate cumulative GPA. So if you're looking to change your undergraduate cumulative GPA, that's not going to do it. You should talk to your advisor about whether that's even something you should be worried about, but it's going to be counted towards that number. And then graduate classes are always considered separately, and so your graduate GPA is completely separate, so it's blank slate. An argument could be made for it's blank slate for Post-Bacc because it's a separate line item. For medical schools, at least that I've had this conversation with, they say, we see it. Post-Bacc is separate, graduate is separate, we see it. So it's not a huge deciding factor, but some students prefer it one way or the other. For us, at least at Hopkins, it was based on the number of elective courses and how interesting, frankly, we thought they were. We could offer more interesting, more intricate upper division classes at a master's level instead of a certificate, so that's why we did it that way, but that's not going to be true at every campus. So it's mostly about like the content and what we're trying to give students. We had at Berkeley, it was a certificate, undergraduate level certificate for the academic enhancers, and they got into medical school too, it was fine. So it's really a personal choice. We had a lot of upper division classes, and so that worked fine. So it's pretty subjective. Anything else?
One more piece to that Adam mentioned when we did this 4 years ago is that if it's a certificate or a master's degree, then you have a better chance at getting financial aid.
Oh,
Whereas if it's non-certificate or just a collection of courses, then you would not. And you're saying yes, so that's true distinction.
That is true.
All right, so that's
Yeah.
something just to file that.
Yeah, and not all programs, even degree programs, allow you to qualify for financial aid. So that's a specific question you need to ask. You have to agree to certain things with federal financial aid to track students and make sure that they're actually legitimately taking classes and you're not just pocketing money and walking away with it and all that stuff. So some programs do not offer financial aid because they don't have the resources to track. So it's a good question to ask if it matters to you.
So do you want to stay there and use this mic, or you want to go to the?
Sure. Do we need a mic? Can you guys hear in the back?
Yeah.
I think we all
Does it
have.
matter for the recording?
Oh, does it matter for you?
It
might
is it?
now.
Okay, that's fine. We can
Just
use
so that
it.
we
Yeah, we can use it. So one thing to sort of add to that is the record enhancing programs are either going to be graduate level courses or medical level courses. And so you need to decide which one you want for your own personal needs. All right, and so that's kind of a theme that you're going to hear tonight from all of us, is that there are a lot of post-bacc programs out there, and they're all going to be different, and they're all designed for different students. So none of the programs here, like none of us are competing, like, oh, we want to get you to come to our program, because they're all for different students. And so you need to figure out what kind of student you are and what kind of post-bacc program you want for your specific application. So oftentimes we'll get students who will apply to us to one of our many post-bacc programs, and we'll say, oh, you know what, you're actually a much better fit for this program. And we'll send students over to different programs if they're a better fit for those programs. So listen carefully and try and figure out what is it that I need for my application to get me into medical school or get me into dental school or whatever. Is there anyone here that's looking for dental? Is everyone medical? What are the hands? Dental? Hands mean dental? Okay, all right, great. So post-bacc programs are great for both of those, and we feed post-baccs for both of those. So I'm specifically here, and Lisa also, representing the SMP program at Georgetown. And so that stands for Special Master's Program. So oftentimes in the post-bacc, the record enhancing post-baccs, they're called Special Masters or Record Enhancing. So the Special Masters are all a group of post-bacc programs that specifically take medical courses as opposed to graduate courses. So our program, the Special Master's Program, is a one-year master's degree. You leave with an MS in physiology. You start around the beginning of August and you're done in the beginning of June. Yeah. And so you take graduate and medical courses. The majority of the courses that you take are the medical courses. And so you sit in this class with Georgetown's first year medical students, and you take the same courses, you sit in on the same lectures, and you take the same exams, and then you are graded against the medical students. So it's as if you were a Georgetown first year medical student, and so then you're able to send grades out, send transcript out that say, this is, if I were a medical student, this is how I'm able to do, right? And so the power in this is that if your undergrad GPA is not exactly what you want it to be, or not exactly what medical schools want it to be, and they question, well, how is he or she going to do in medical school? You can say, this is how I do in medical school, right? I'm in medical school now, I'm taking the courses, and this is how I do. So about 70% of the courses are medical courses, and then the other 30% that you take are graduate courses that are there to add to the information. You're walking out with an MS in physiology, and so some of the physiology is covered in the second year of medical school, so we cover the rest of that there. You take gross anatomy, like with the cadavers in this program. It's a great program. It's very stressful. Yes, it can talk to that. It's a competitive, stressful program, but it is good. It gets good results. About 60% of the students who are in the program get into medical school the year that they're in the program. So you apply. We recommend that the majority of our students apply to medical school before they start the program. They apply in August, start in August, and then do secondaries and interviews while they're in the program. So about 50 to 60% will get in the year that they're in the program, and then about 80 to 90% will get in the next year. So it's a pretty successful model. Okay, so that's sort of like an introduction. Happy to answer more questions, but I want to just see if Lisa wants to add anything to this. So Lisa completed the SMP program in June. And so we brought her along to kind of give a student perspective about the actual application cycle. She had some interviews this last couple weeks for her medical school this year, and then she's working for us currently now for the SMP program as a kind of administrative assistant to help us out with a lot of stuff. So go ahead and add anything you want.
So just a little background, I guess, academically for me. I'm from Northern California. I did my undergrad at UC Davis. I was a biochemistry major and a physiology minor. I needed the academic enhancement a lot. Undergrad was not my brightest moment. But I went on that website we showed you, and I looked at all the programs, and I knew I needed the academic enhancement. I talked with my advisor, like, seriously, your advisors are your lifesavers, about what program would be best for me. And so I chose master's program just because I was pretty comfortable with my undergraduate courses. I didn't feel like that would be the right challenge for my application, improve my application, so I chose a master's program. And I think, I know we're not here to we're here to sort of sell our program, and just speaking personally, I chose Georgetown because of the record of getting students into medical school and the fact that you are graded against the meds. Speaking on interviews, I can say I will do well in your medical school because of my experiences in this program, which, gives you the confidence in an interview you really need.
Teacher, I don't know if I'm allowed to ask this. Did they bring up your post-bacc, or you had to bring it up in conversation during your interview?
Well, for my interview, it wasn't a one-on-one interview. Every school interviews differently, and some schools are blind interviews where they don't have the person interviewing doesn't have your grades. My format was an MMI, which is a multiple mini interview, so they don't have my application in front of them when I'm talking to them. I'm given a prompt and have to respond to the prompt. But I worked in my experiences with the prompt just because some of them are, fairly traditional interview questions of how do you define leadership, and you want to be able to pull from those experiences, especially with the way med school education is shifting more towards team-based learning as opposed to just a traditional lecture format. I got a lot of that in the SMP, and I knew I could articulate that, so I brought up my experiences in the MMI, but it wasn't. With the school that I interviewed at, it wasn't like, oh, you got a C- in this class in undergrad your sophomore year. They didn't have that. I haven't really heard of any schools that do that sort of nitpicking.
Sometimes they do. But in interviews, it's nice because I'm sure you guys have done some sort of interview prep with this group, yes. But in general, there's only 2 questions that you can guarantee you're going to get in an interview. There are 1,000 other options that you can never prepare for. But there are 2 you will always get, and that is, why do you want to be a physician, and why do you want to come to this school, right? And so answering the why you want to come to this school when you've had some sort of post-bacc record enhancing, you can say, oh, well, I see from your curriculum you do this. Well, when I was a graduate student, or in my post-bacc program, we did something similar. So it's really easy to bring up. It just sort of comes up organically. So even if they don't have it in front of you, it's going to come up, and you should bring it up. Okay, yeah. Or do you want to move on, or do you want to add? Let's move to Bill.
And then we'll do Alex, and then we'll do questions.
Sounds great. Happy to fill in. Everything you've heard here is perfectly on spot, and I just want to kind of take a step back and then bring it to where the program that I direct stands in all of this. In short, you're seeing a whole bunch of decision forks. It's like, do you need a career changer, or do you need a record enhancer? Okay, let's talk record enhancer. Do you want or need an undergraduate level or a graduate level? Okay, let's focus on graduate level. Do you want one or need one that's medical school based, or one that's graduate school based, or some combination? Now, some of these are going to be answered for you because of other realities in life, geography, finances, et cetera, et cetera. But let's just keep digging in. The special master's program is one which is very, very solidly based on a medical school curriculum. 70% of the curriculum is, you're sitting next to the first year medical students. You're tested and graded against them. Just so that you know, Dr. Whitney and I work very close together. All of our programs are connected. There are several others we recruit together, so we communicate a lot. And for that reason, if she sees an application that doesn't quite fit in the SMP, they might punt it our way, and vice versa. Well, let's keep digging in a little further. The SMP requires that you have a pretty solid MCAT score. The Advanced Biomedical Sciences certificate does not. We actually have test prep built within. The SMP is not for pre-dental students. The ABS is. About 20% of our students are pre-dental. And we have DAT prep as well, if needed. Other things. These are cohort-based programs. You're sitting in the classroom with the same students for all the courses. Not all programs are cohort-based. They may be more a la carte. Other things to consider. With regard to a cohort-based program, they're usually a prescribed curriculum that usually qualifies for financial aid because of that coherency. In the case of the special masters, it is a master's program, and they're almost all qualified for federal financial aid. Certificates are a different beast altogether. As it happens, this is one of the 3 certificate programs at the graduate level that actually qualifies for federal financial aid. And the reason is that it's a cohort-based, standalone program. It's not a certificate that you earn in addition to a master's degree or PhD, but it is a standalone focused program. Now, with the record enhancers, you have to ask a lot of other questions. In both of these 2 programs, we focus very early on in the program on your study skills. We talk about time management. We talk about preparing for lectures, which you may not be doing already. We talk about preparing for exams. We talk about just mitigating test anxiety when you sit down. We talk about all those things. So when you start asking questions about what program is best for you, you should look at these things. Do you do well in tests? Okay, well, mitigating test anxiety may not be such a problem. Do you have an MCAT score already? How is it? Is it strong enough? Do you need to enhance that? With regard to some of the bigger questions, you really have to ask the question, what's the long-term success of the program and the students who graduated from that program? But be cautious with numbers, because sometimes they'll say, oh yeah, all of our students get into a program, but they're in medical schools that are maybe not in the profile that you're shooting for. So be very careful about those kinds of things. There are a range of other issues that you want to bring up, and look at the promotional material, look at the mission, look at the reputation, talk to alumni, talk to your advisor. All of those sources are extremely important in getting a better picture about the program. Now, just a word or 2 about the ABS certificate. As I mentioned, we do not require test scores for admission. We have test prep built in. That's one of the main differences between the 2. About half the curriculum is taught by medical school faculty. It's not medical school courses per se, but you'll see the same slides, the same test questions, the same corny jokes in the lectures, et cetera, et cetera. They're all there just as you would see them from those faculty members. The other half are taught by faculty from George Mason on their graduate level faculty. We are a cohort-based program, and another thing to think about is what is the dynamic in the classroom? Is it something, or the class I should say, is it one where they're hyper-competitive, or is it one where there's really a let's bring everyone else up at the same time? You know, a group identity. Does it have a real sense of cohesion within? Are the people nice? I mean, some of these programs, you're not really competing as you would be at the undergraduate level. You're just trying to get yourself more firmly planted on the ground academically so that you can go on to those next steps. So what else is going on in the group? Just get a sense as to what the dynamic is in that group. And we try to do that with team building exercise. We have a ropes course on campus, so they go out there and climb.
It's fun.
Yeah. Did you do it?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. We have a number of things like that. The SMP has a number of activities like that. But see what the group is all about, and see if you fit in. Now, not by any design, but the ABS would actually qualify as a minority-serving program. We're about 45% African American, about 10% Latino, but that doesn't count the real hidden diversity within the program. We have 109 students this year. Over 20 languages are spoken by that population. A lot of first-generation Americans, first-generation college students. I could tell you stories about parents incarcerated, all kinds of diversity there in the population. So see if you fit into that program, because you're there, and you need to get through and come out the other end with all those study skills down, the great enhancement, the new knowledge, the way of looking at medicine or dentistry or the healthcare profession, you may change your mind, but all those things are important decisions to consider when you're picking a program. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, and before I pass over to her, as I was just thinking about that as he was talking, other things to think about is how big of a classroom do you guys like? Do you like big classrooms where you can sort of do your own thing and melt into the background, where there's 200 or 300 students? Do you want something that's really small, where it's just like 30 students, where you can work together? Do you like to do remote learning? They're all different kinds of post-bac programs. So think about fitting in, but also think about what is it that you hope to get. So the ABS program he just talked about has about 100 students. The SMP program has about 200 students. So these are bigger programs. So is that something that you want, or would you prefer something smaller? So that was just a thought before I pass it over to you. Did you have a question about that before I move on?
Not exactly that, but it's like one of the things that's relevant to what we talked about. So if you're a student who's considering a linkage program, should you like pay special attention to like SMP graduate programs or undergraduate certificates?
Most of the ones that have linkages are SMP or graduate program. I haven't seen many that have linkages from undergrad. Yeah.
So it also depends on what you mean by linkage. So first of all, in terms of Post-Bacc as a general marketplace of programs, more career changer programs have linkages than academic enhancer programs. That's just the way that it happens. So you have to look at the specific programs. The other thing is that there are programs that are attached to medical schools where there's sort of, they might not be on that search engine at all, which is another good reason to talk to your advisor. You might have to like apply to their medical school and not get in to be eligible for this like basket where they catch the students that are almost there but not quite there. But then the thing is that those are going to be only linkages to that single medical school in that particular case, because that's the role they're playing for the larger institution. So some will have multiple, others will just have the one because that's what they're attached to. And so the thing is like if you're, it's a linkage program at University X, but you don't really want to go to University X, is that really a good idea, right? I mean, if you don't want to be there, then it's not doing you any good, and you might be better off at a place that really fits you and helps you be successful. The other thing I would add to the conversation that's going on here about things to watch out for, I think the one, at least to me, from my perspective, the one real advantage of a post-bac program versus a la carte is also the advising. And I think this is really hard to wrap your brain around from where you're sitting. Because maybe not all, but many of these programs will say they offer advising. But not all advising is created equal, so what you need to do is think about the advising that you're receiving now and what's valuable to you and what hasn't been valuable to you and what you need to be successful, and then ask those specific questions to post-bac programs about like what's being offered. Like if you're a good writer and you don't need help writing your personal statement, that's great, you're fine. So if a program is not going to offer you that, you'll be good to go. But when a program says they offer support for writing your personal statement, do they mean like they explain how one should go about writing a personal statement, or does that mean they go through multiple drafts with you until you get a good personal statement? Those are two very different ends of the spectrum. So you have to think about like, what do I need to be successful, me personally, and how are these different programs handling that? I think that's really important. Other things like the MCAT prep, which has been mentioned, it's something you can get elsewhere, but it's good to get it in the program. The thing I would mention, since we've talked about financial aid, the reason that we offer MCAT prep through our program is because if we offer it through the program and charge it as a fee, then financial aid has to cover it. That's why we did it that way. Versus if we say, you should take advantage of, then it's not necessarily covered by financial aid and it's an added burden to you, and we didn't want it to become like a, can I afford it, can I not afford it? So if it's wrapped into the program, it's generally covered under financial aid, which is a nice perk, I guess, if it matters, if you need that. Okay, so Hopkins, we have 2 post-bac programs relevant to today's discussion is the Academic Enhancer Program. It is a graduate level program. The master's degree in biotechnology has been a long-standing master's degree that people get for all sorts of reasons, not just post-bac. And we did that on purpose because we wanted to make sure that if the worst happens and you don't get accepted, you have a degree that has value, that you can use for something else, and many people do beyond the post-bac program. So it is a valuable degree, period. And so it's you take 10 courses, they're all 4 credits, so it's 40 credits total. And then the other thing that I was thinking about when I created the program was I went back and looked at the data for what medical schools want from pre-med students and really thinking about, okay, if I get the chance to create a post-bac program, what would be like the ideal thing that medical schools would be looking at? And one thing you see when you look at the data is that yes, they want you to be strong in the sciences, they want you to be strong in the classroom, nobody disagrees about that. But then there's also a whole nother suite of skills that they want you to have. They want you to be leaders, they want you to be good on teams, they want you to be good communicators, both written and orally, and then they want you to be culturally competent, work well with others, make connections with other people, build trust, etc., like the whole gambit of interpersonal skills. And in contemplating that, I started thinking about my own education and how silly it would be if I suggested to the chemistry department that we just take people and stick them in a room with a periodic chart and say, magically they're going to learn chemistry just because they are in a room with a periodic chart. Chemistry department would think that that would be ridiculous, but that's how we handle teamwork and communication and leadership on college campuses unless you take specific courses that are towards that. As a science major, I never took a course on negotiation, on leadership, on teamwork. It was just like I was in groups of people who had to complete projects, and that's how I learned to do teamwork, which is kind of ridiculous in terms of learning the practicality of how one is on a team. So what we did is we talked to a lot of medical schools about like how many science credits do you need to be convinced that somebody is good in the sciences. And then we added some additional courses where all of our students are required to take a class on leadership and teamwork in the health professions. We have a course on communications, both oral and written communication, and then they take a psychosocial determinants of health and implications on diagnostics course. Those are all required, and the idea is not to expect you to magically have these skills, but put you in an environment with your colleagues to discuss how does this work? How do we have conversations with people that are very different from us? How do we have teams where you have people that are from different decades and they have different life experiences and they grew up different places? Like, how do you navigate that? And how do you navigate a health professions environment where you're going to have specialists and primary care providers, etc., basically who are all at the same level trying to make decisions? Who gets to make the final decision if they're all on the same scale? It's not a hierarchy in healthcare. Everybody has a valid perspective, and how do you do that? So we wanted to do that in the classroom. And so we've done that, and that's what our students do. We wanted to make sure that our curriculum was open enough and not so tight and crazy and stressful that our students couldn't also think about creating nonprofits and building companies and doing innovative things and building their experiences and thinking outside the box and all those other things. So we've actually had students who have created companies while they were in the program. We also had students do the run-of-the-mill, I'm going to learn a new language. I'm going to become fluent in Swahili. We have students that do things like that. We wanted to make sure that it wasn't just like class, 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 class. Because we think that the experience of being a pre-med and the experience of preparing for medical school is more than just the classes you take. And so that's our philosophical perspective that the program is built around. It is a one-year program. You start at the very beginning of the summer, typically it's the last week of May. And then you're done typically April, May of the year. So it's 3 semesters, 10 courses, roughly speaking, 3 courses a semester. You get to take 4 electives. We have a lot of interesting ones. We have a lot of personalized medicine. We have some public health. We have some bioinformatics courses. There have been a lot of students who've been interested in bioinformatics. And so they take that. There's also like biostats and your run-of-the-mill cancer biology, HIV, AIDS, is kind of typical classes that students are taking. let me think what else. In terms of acceptances, we have more than 95% of students have been accepted over 2 application cycles. And we've been approached by multiple medical schools to build linkages with them. So we feel like our curriculum has been really well received by medical schools. But again, it's an issue of fit. We have a small class. We have about 40-ish, I think, is what we're going to shoot for this year. This last year we had 49. The year before we had 33. So we kind of like the smaller group. Our classes are no bigger than 20. And so it's a small model, which is not for everyone. It can be too much to be around a small group for too long. Our students are not in medical school classes. You're not doing that with us. So you don't have that opportunity, but you also don't have that pressure. Depends on which one is more important to you. And we exclusively do medicine: osteopathic, allopathic, naturopathic. No dentistry. We don't feel like we have the infrastructure to adequately support those students. And so we've had a couple apply to dental, but it's totally happenstance. We don't on purpose accept dental students. I think I covered everything that there's talked about.
Open it up to questions?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll ask a different question now because you guys answered it, but for each of you, is it possible to talk about the application cycle, deadlines, and requisites? Just, I know you can find it online, but you guys are here.
Is there something specific you want to say?
Sure, so like if I'm graduating in May, which I am, what's the most appropriate time, considering that there are people currently applying and maybe not getting into medical school who will
Right.
also be applying, to think about your programs and whether or not to take the GRE or academic, things like that.
So we require a standardized test. Does not have to be the MCAT. It can be the SAT or the ACT if you have that as well. Yes, I know it's been a long time since I've taken the ACT or the SAT, but we understand that. If I were applying to a post-Bacc program, I'm 41, and so my MCAT, my SAT and ACT scores would be whatever number of years old. They still have them. You can still ask for them, and if I saw that year I graduated under my degree, I would take that into account. The reason we do that is that the MCAT is a stupid, awful, horrible exam. But the one thing we know is that standardized tests predict other standardized tests. So we can use the ACT, SAT, GRE, GMAT, all those as predictors of the others. We don't select heavily based on any standardized test, but it's good information to have. So if you haven't taken the MCAT, for God's sakes, don't take it just for us. That you don't want to dig yourself a hole. If you're a transfer student, you got to have something, and if you got out of doing SAT, ACT, then most students do the GRE. The GRE has an age limit. You can't get scores past, I think, 3 years or 5 years. But we accept it if you have it. Otherwise, we know, like, you can tell that you haven't graduated yet based on your application, and we will still consider your application before you finish. So that's not a problem for us, as long as you'll be done by, the start of our program. It's not a big deal for us.
I remember having to hunt down the SAT scores to apply to Post-Bacc programs.
Yeah. So for the SMP program, our application is open now. It closes in May for this cycle, so that's kind of how the cycle works. We also have to have a standardized test. We highly recommend the MCAT. So for students applying to our program, because we hope to get them in the year they're in their program, we kind of expect you to have everything you already need to get into medical school. So we want to see a strong MCAT. We want to see sort of the clinical experiences that you need, the volunteer experiences, the leadership, kind of all that stuff you want on your MCAS application. We want to see that before you come, so that the only thing you need to sort of fix at that point is your GPA, so that everything else is ready to go, and then you come, you show schools how well you can do in medical school courses, and then hopefully get in that year. So if you're a student who doesn't want to have the MCAT or doesn't want to take it, we can take practice MCAT scores for students or GREs if you want to take that, just so that we have an idea of where you're going to sit, so that if you decide to then take the MCAT later, we can do that. But we do want to see sort of everything else that you need from a medical school application, and so from that perspective, usually the people who apply to the SMP program are people who might get into medical school, like are right on the edge, or they will get in, or they're just really, really close. So we usually recommend, if you think like, I might get in this year, we recommend you apply to medical school like this cycle, right? And then we actually accept the AMCAS application as an application to us. So you don't have to do a second one, you just send your PDF of your AMCAS application and has all the information that we need, so you don't have to fill out any additional applications. And our hope is you get into medical school and you don't have to come to us and you don't have to go through the stress of the SMP, but just in case you don't, we're sort of that fallback that you're super close to getting in, but you just need that little extra bump. So that's kind of our application process.
The ABS somewhat dovetails with the SMP, the big difference being that no standardized tests are needed for application to the program, although we will certainly look at them. And we know that the majority of students have one, MCAT or DAT. They just may not be all that happy to share with us at that point. We know it's probably in the upper 490s on average, although I've seen everywhere from a 474 to a 514 once the word comes out. Again, it's almost everything but that GPA, and in our case, the test score that's needed to really become competitive. As a result, the SMP probably has half plus of the students in the cycle while they're in the program, whereas for the ABS, it's maybe 10%. And a few will get in, but the vast majority are applying after the program. We have a very late deadline, it's July 15th, partly because there's two populations we draw from. One is that senior in college, you're just hoping for that good score in that last semester, but it doesn't come. So what do? May, June, they scramble. Well, we're there. We'll have to check. The other is the individual who's in the application cycle, got on a wait list, and is waiting for that, back in the day, it was the fat envelope, not the thin one. And come April, when those local offers have to give up all but one seat, the wait lists start to churn, and it doesn't go in their favor, so they too are scrambling to find something. So we have a fairly late deadline. And apart from that, we want to see that there's some evidence that we can actually do something for the student. The student takes organic chemistry 3 times, goes from an F to a D to a C. I don't think we're going to be able to do much, but we're happy to at least have a conversation. But if there's something, we see an upward trajectory, we see that there was a blowout first semester because of too much partying or homesickness or whatever it was, we see that there's potential there to recover based on study skill development and a chance to do it, then that is in the applicant's favor.
Can we talk a little bit more about that? Because I think that's so important. There are lots of post-Bacc programs in the country, and they are varying widely in terms of how competitive they are. And I think it's really important, that point that you made about can you help them, you know, because they're expensive. The programs are not cheap.
Right.
And so it's a little disingenuous, I think, to take people who have, you know, 3Ds in organic chemistry, but there are programs that will take them. So who can you help? Like, who do you think?
Right. So like the SMP, for example, we can help people who, as I mentioned, have all of the qualifications to get into medical school. They have strong MCAT, good experiences, but just a slightly lower GPA than what's going to get you in. So the average GPA to get into medical school now, undergrad, is like a 3.7. So if you're sitting under a 3.7, it's going to be harder to get in. So if you're sitting at like a 3.3, but you have a good MCAT and good experiences, you might get in the cycle, but you might not. Right, so we can help somebody who's like that. If you have a 2.5 and a 500 on your MCAT, it's not something we can help, so that's not a kind of student that we're going to accept. So you got to look at the numbers, you got to look at sort of what, and sort of what kind of schools people get in afterwards to see whether or not they can help you.
Yeah, the other thing to think about is you should normalize your expectations as well on the topic of, you know, like, so for example, we have a list on our website about the schools that our students have gotten into, the students that have applied. So the other thing to keep in mind is that if I don't have any students that apply to a school, I'm not going to have any that get accepted, right? So you have to take that into account when you're looking at those lists. How likely is it that a lot of people apply to that particular school? So just to pick on one, Loma Linda, which is a heavily religious California school, I don't recall the last time I had a single student apply to that school. So it's not going to be on the list of either Post-Bacc program, but not because students couldn't get in, just because none have applied. But the converse of that is that if you have like if you have a 2.9 or if you have a 3.0 and you struggle with standardized test taking and you don't do very well on the MCAT, the likelihood of you getting into an MD PhD program at Yale or Hopkins or Harvard is frankly not good, right? I mean, is it possible? Yes, of course it's possible, but it's not as likely as a lot of other outcomes. So I think the other thing is that, when you begin to look at post-bac programs, you should really be focusing on what is my long-term goal? Because I'm telling you now, I don't want to hear that going to Hopkins post-bac is your long-term goal. That basically means that once you get into the post-bac program, that's it, you're done for life, that's it, you've accomplished your goal. No, of course not. And getting into medical school should not be your long-term goal. Being a practicing physician who works with a particular population and serves the needs of these people who need your help, that is a long-term goal to achieve. And realizing that there are lots of paths to get there, I think is really important for your mental health. That going to school X is not as important as getting to destination Z. And so you need to be realistic about how you're going to be able to get there, and also open to all the ways that you can get there as well. Because whether we can help you accomplish your goal and whether we fit also has to do with what is that goal. There is nothing that I can do to help a 2.9 get into an MD PhD program in a single year at a place like Hopkins. I'm sorry, but it doesn't happen. It just doesn't. So I think the other thing to be careful about is make sure that you understand what your goals are and what's realistic. Again, talking to your advisor is a good way to have some conversations about that. And then think about, like, here's my goal and here's where I am now. What resources and opportunities do I need to get there? What does that look like for me? What kinds of courses does it mean? What kind of advising does it mean? Where in the country should I be? If you want to work with Spanish-speaking populations, doing a post-bac program in the middle of Montana is probably not your best bet, right? You're going to want to be someplace that has Spanish-speaking populations. So also keeping that in mind. We are not as hardcore about GPA, certainly not about the MCAT. We fully expect all the students that are applying to our program to be a work in progress. But our selection criteria is more about how much can we help this person in a single year. And then also taking into account, we have an essay in our application called Different This Time, and you need to take ownership of the stuff that is your fault, which is everything in your life to some degree is your fault. You play a role in everything that happens in your life. Some of it is somebody else's fault too, but you play a role. I don't want to hear, it's not my fault I didn't do well in these 12 courses, my professors were bad. Bad professors exist everywhere. It's just a fact of life. You have to be able to either do a good job picking classes or adapt in the classroom or find a way to manage or something. So we look heavily at that because we want to make sure that you understand what went wrong in the past if something went wrong, and you have a plan of how you're going to take care of it moving forward. What does that look like for you? If you partied a lot, you're going to stop partying. Or you're going to reserve your partying for after finals. Whatever it is, totally fine. We just want to make sure that you're aware of it, you're taking ownership of it. The reason for that is that medical schools want people who are adults, who are mature, who are independent and take responsibility. I have 2 young kids. I have a 5.5 and a 1.5 at home. I'm done. Those are the only kids I need. So I'm not going to be chasing any of my students around and making sure you finish your homework. That is your responsibility. So we want to make sure that we're accepting students into the program who are prepared to be successful independently. I don't have to chase you around to do your homework. And they're going to raise their hand when they need help, because that's also your responsibility. And then you don't have to have a perfect test score. You don't have to have taken the MCAT. You're going to do an MCAT prep. lots of reasons why people don't do on standardized tests. That's not a big deal. You need to be prepared to do well in the classroom. Ideal would be to have demonstrated it at least for a single semester. We want to see if you haven't done well, an upward trend is nice so that we have a little bit of faith that you're going to be okay and we don't have to worry about you. The worst thing that can happen is that we recruit you to a post-Bacc program and then you fail miserably and dig yourself a deeper hole. That is the thing that keeps us up at night. Are we recruiting people that we're just, we're bringing them into a program that's going to make it worse? So we're trying to make sure that we're keeping you safe. And then the other thing we think about is the resources that we have to offer. You know, is this somebody who's going to do well with the other things that we have, with the opportunities we have? Is this somebody, for us in particular, we think a lot about innovation and leadership and opportunity. Is this someone who's going to build organizations? Is this someone who's going to find some cool things to do? Is this someone who's going to be inventive about what they can come up with on their own? Is this someone that's going to work well with the team? Since we have such a small class, we need people who are going to participate with their colleagues. Is this somebody who's going to say hi to other people and participate and do well in those things and be part of our family?
You guys have more questions for the panel? Yeah, go ahead.
Say you take the MCAT, for those programs that offer MCAT, let's say you take the MCAT and you're happy with your score, would you still have to pay for the MCAT prep that some of your programs offer?
I'll speak for the ABS, it's built into the tuition. It's offered to all students who want it. And it's just baked in.
Yeah, we do that as well for financial reasons.
Yeah. What's it about the average GPA that post-Bacc programs accept?
So it's going to depend on each post-Bacc program, so I'm sure each of us can
3.18.
say.
For the academic record enhancers?
But for ours, it's 3.18 for this year, undergrad. But I will say, there's a negative correlation between undergraduate GPA and program GPA. And that's overall GPA, not science GPA, which is a far better predictor.
And for the SMP, ours is about a 3.3.
We don't select heavily based on it, but when you do the average, it's about a 3.5, 3.6 actually for our program. But we accept everything down to like a 2.8, 2.9.
Yeah, we've had lower than 3.0. That's an average.
Yeah, but you would have to have an upward trend. That's not like a 2.8 every semester consistently. That would be. Lately, you have done better.
We're about 10% below the 3.0, but there's always a story behind it.
Anything else? So,
question.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
What's the cost per credit for your programs?
We don't
Think of it that way, because
We don't have, yeah, so we don't have like a per credit, we just have a, this is how much the whole program costs.
Yeah.
Do you know what it is? You paid it.
Yeah.
40.
It's like 49,000 something hundred. I had to take out federal loans because I don't have 50K. So, but I mean, not to sound glib, but I looked at it as an investment in my future, and you're going to be in debt when you go to medical school pretty much no matter what. So, you know, if
Add it to the pile.
yeah, add it to the pile.
Yeah,
I'll pay
so
off
post-Bacc
eventually.
programs are expensive. The ABS is cheaper.
It's about 31,000 for a 20 credit program, so it's a little bit more than 50 credit. And I will say, just as a side piece here, so to speak, the ABS is actually based on the General Masters of Physiology at Georgetown. And about half of our students actually transition into the full master's program, which Dr. Whitney corrects. And it's actually a very cost-efficient way of kind of navigating both and leading with a full master's degree. So if you want the certificate, great, that's an option. Continue on to the master's degree and finish the full master's, that's another option.
Is the 31 for the master's or for the certificate?
Just
Just a certificate.
Oh, okay.
It's additional 10 credits for the master's degree, so slightly higher per credit. But
Ours, I think, is 43, 44. Check the website; it will have the most recent price, but it's 40 credits. It's a full degree. So, but we don't calculate it per credit. I don't know. All the classes are 4 credits. Or it is 4 credits.
The Hopkins is 3 semesters, 4 classes this semester.
So it's 10 classes total,
Yeah.
3 in the summer, 3 in the fall, 1 over the January intersession, and then 3 in the spring. So you finish in spring.
Do you recommend applying sooner rather than later? Like, I know the deadlines are at the end of next semester, but like, should we apply that winter?
I mean, we have rolling admissions,
Yeah.
so the sooner you apply, the more seats are available. So it's always good to apply sooner rather than later,
Yeah.
I think for anyone. But we have accepted people on orientation day. Like, we accept people through the entire cycle. So if you aren't 100% sure or you're not ready, you apply like when you're ready, but it's always better. I think we accepted 2 people on orientation
We
day.
accepted 2 people like the day before orientation. I just want to carry off of what you said about rushing your MCAT. I took the old MCAT and I took it despite being told I was not ready, and I was stubborn and hell-bent on taking it. I didn't do well. So even though that score's expired, it still kind of follows me and it's on my application. I took the new MCAT when I was ready. I did much better. I'm very proud of that score. So for any program and for any professional school, take your tests, like take your MCAT, your DAT, take those things when you're ready. Even if it means you have to wait another year to apply, like take it when you're ready, take it when you can be proud of your score, because it's not worth it. No program is worth rushing your MCAT or a GRE or DAT.
It will follow you.
It follows you
It
forever.
follows you for 3 years.
You're already a non-traditional student if you're in one of these programs. So another year, if you're using it productively to do, among other things, prepare for the MCAT, is well spent.
Yeah, so while the S&P is a rolling admissions, I have applicants that panic and they're like, I'm taking it in January, am I too late? It's not too late. What will hurt your application is applying with a bad MCAT.
Yeah, the ABS is rolling as well, but we have a lot of expansion capability. As with the SMP, we have a hybrid section now too, which in our case, we can just expand to sections where you do recordings of the lectures and have an in-class discussion of the content. And in both cases, those classes actually outperform the main lecture section. So.
We do rolling admissions as well, but I would say you want to apply early. I don't think there's ever been a case where there are students who are applying really close to the end of our application cycle that we wouldn't have accepted. We would have accepted early on and we don't accept then. I don't think that really happens. What happens is we have students, so we accept nationally. There's no difference between being in Maryland versus being anywhere else. And so we've had students who, miss the deadline because their recommenders don't turn in their letters on time because we don't get the transcripts because of whatever. So like you hit submit and that's great and all, but there are other pieces of your application that we need. And so the earlier you push submit, the earlier you can begin kindly, respectfully, and gently harassing all the other people that we need and stuff from. And then the other thing is the earliest you make a decision about what you want to do if you're moving. You have to set up housing. You have to figure out, like, you're going to get an apartment. Where are you going to live? Engaging with other people in the program, finding, all those other things you need. So we also find that students who apply really late in the cycle come in with a whole lot of stress because they're sleeping on somebody's couch or they're staying in a hotel and they can't afford to stay there for very long and they're living out of a moving van. And I mean, if you're doing local, obviously it's not necessarily going to be an issue, but do you want to commute to Georgetown from where you are if it's a commute for the first 2 weeks because you haven't found an apartment yet? I mean, it's probably better to be secure that that's what you want to do, know that's what you want to do, make decisions, move your electricity, etc. And then feel good about it. You know where the grocery store is, you found your laundry, you're all good and prepared for the first day of class, right? Not panicking because it's the day before orientation, which that would.
But those people were very happy to get in.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
So I would, if you know you're going to be interested in post-bacc programs, I would say apply early just to get it out there. And we definitely have students that apply and then they get into medical school, and we're so happy for them that they don't have to do a post-bacc program. So that's fine. If you're applying now and you're not sure if you're going to get in, we don't care. That's fine. It's not a big deal to us.
Yeah.
We like those emails.
Yeah. We'll happily take you off our roll if you get into medical school.
Yeah.
That's our goal, is to get everyone into their dream schools, right? So if you get in and not come to us, good for you.
I have So say like I did apply to go to Georgetown Med School after doing the SMP, would I simply repeat the courses again?
Oh, that's a good question. So there's kind of two things I want to talk about there. What happens if you get in, and then whether or not you have any special status as a Georgetown SMP student to the medical school. So the answer, I'll start with what happens if you apply to Georgetown Medical School. So we suggest that everyone everyone in the SMP program applies to Georgetown because you are in a special pool. There's no technical linkage there, but you are in a special pool, and the top half of the class gets an interview to Georgetown's medical school. And you've already shown how you can do in their courses, and you've already taken them, so they tend to like a lot of our students. So while there's no official linkage, every year we get in probably 30 to 40 of our students into Georgetown's medical school. And that's good for Georgetown's medical school because you've already taken a large majority of the first year courses. You do not have to take them again. And so you get to then have a really easy first year taking like the silly like medical, right? Like doctoring courses, like, anyway, I won't get into that. But you get then the SMP students who are now first year medical students who have already taken the courses are TAs for the courses they've taken. You get paid to do it. You get to listen to the material again, right, and actually teach it. And so the SMPs who go to Georgetown's medical school like rock the boards because you learned it once for the SMP, you taught it again, you study for it a third time for the boards. So they're just sort of like set up for each level. You do well on the boards, you get these great residencies, so they just become like more and more successful as they go on. If you go to other medical schools, which is what the majority of the schools do, it's up to that school as to whether or not you get to be out of those courses. So usually every medical school has their own weird curriculum and set up very differently. So a lot of times the courses don't match up what you took at Georgetown to other schools. So oftentimes you do have to repeat these courses if you go take it at another school, but you've already taken all of the information. And so again, the students rock the courses, top students, they get AOA, which is like the fraternity of honor students for medical school, and then they end up just being really successful because they've already taken it. Is there another hand?
Do you have time for maybe just a couple more questions?
Sure.
I know you have to get on the road to your
Yeah, but we can do a couple more.
couple more.
What was the dynamic like taking the classes like alongside the first year students? What was that dynamic because you were technically a medical student?
So go ahead and explain it. Go ahead.
Yeah, I might be the wrong person to ask in that. So Georgetown SMP has two campuses, main campus and downtown campus. Main campus is about 180 students, and those students take the classes in the lecture hall with the med students right there with the med school faculty. I was a downtown student, so that's a smaller campus. It's about 25 students. And the difference is we watched the lectures pre-recorded beforehand. So let's say our homework for Monday night was to watch 3 lectures. Come to class with a TA or the professor that taught those lectures or a different faculty member. And it was more team-based learning. So I didn't necessarily take classes directly with the medical school students. We did have opportunities to come to Georgetown to take, to like view seminars, a lot of patient panels with the med students. I never felt, I mean, in those cases, and particularly downtown versus main campus, I never felt like anything was different. I never felt like I was treated any differently because of that. I think it was more of an understanding of, like, you're here to do good things and I'm here to do good things, and we're all here for the right reasons. And we either are going to be doctors in 4 years, or we're going to be we're going to get it next year and then be doctors in 4 years. I never felt like there was any sort of like lesser than dynamic between the students, and everyone, the faculty treated us all the same. I don't know, I love Georgetown, that's why I chose to stick around and work for the program.
One more? Anyone? I have one. We'll finish it off with this. So, as you all know, we run a committee process here, and we support our students in that way. Sometimes Post-Bacc programs offer that, sometimes they don't, and then it's just the way it is. So, do you? And if not, then just so you all know, our students just come back to us term for life. So either way, there's a committee letter for you somewhere, but it might be at the Post-Bacc program, and it might be here.
We do a committee letter as well. And we also offer, so we have a group advising course, and then we have individual advising as well. And one of the things we do is we talk about whether you want to go with the Post-Bacc committee letter or an undergraduate letter. And some students do, despite the fact that we have a committee letter, do decide to use their undergraduate letter because of what they feel like. I mean, ultimately what you want is you want a strong application and then a strong packet of letters, either as a committee letter or whatever, to support you. And some students in doing that debate feel like one is going to be stronger than the other. We don't care. I will write a letter or not as you want me to. And so we do. And we also offer a lot of additional support with, we go through 3 to 5 drafts of every personal statement with every single student. We talk to students about secondaries, we go through your experiences, we talk about disadvantaged status, we go through your list of schools, we do mock interviews, we do all kinds of things with our students. So we support throughout that whole process.
So we're very similar. We have a course that is a group advising course where we sort of go over all the information for applying to medical school. And then every student is assigned a team leader who is one person who is well-versed in medical school applications to go over any additional advising that you might need, any personal advising for your specific application. And then every student is also assigned a letter writer who will write them a letter of recommendation. So for us, if you have a committee letter from Maryland, we suggest you use that committee letter, and then we have a separate letter. So this is how you did in undergrad, and now here's another letter that's saying this is how you do in medical school courses. So you have a separate one, but we suggest you obviously keep your committee letter from Maryland as well.
And because of the common origins, we have a very similar situation. The same course is actually called the same thing, basically.
Same people teach it.
Same people teach it, same people. And in that, the issues that you started mentioning are covered, interviews and essays and the application process. We bring in a lot of recruiters, we run a little fair, that kind of thing. But with regard to a letter, since we only have you for 9 months, we do not do a committee letter per se, but rather an individual letter, and I end up writing almost all of those, which can be used, as mentioned, either as separate from the undergraduate committee, or, and I've sent more than one.
I've sent some to Maryland as well.
University of Maryland, we have more students from University of Maryland this year than any other school, so about a dozen altogether. And we're happy to work with whatever. The one thing I'll caution the students on is, if I'm writing a letter that's to go back to the undergraduate committee to be put into the committee's packet, I need to know what the committee is doing with that, because there are nuances across different schools and different committees. And the last thing I want to hear from a student was, I got really bad advising as an undergraduate, because I certainly can't write that back to the committee. But whatever the case, I just need to know what the committee is doing with the letter, but I know in this case.
And kind of back to what was said earlier, what you do with the letter is also going to very much depend on you as an applicant and what's best for your application. So I think all the schools are going to sit down with you and say, this is probably your best option to do this, as opposed to the other option. So it all comes down to sort of individual advising, because each of you has a very different application than your neighbor. And so the advice is going to depend on your own application.
So I think we'll stop it there. Thank you all very much. So much.